Hey guys, welcome to English Today. We're going to kick it into our very first reading unit beginning today. But before we get started in our reading unit, let's spend about 10 minutes just getting connected with our own independent reading books. Today, while you're reading, go ahead and try and figure out who is your character the most loyal to? And how does he or she show that loyalty? And if you can, maybe find a couple action verbs. Feel free to share out after your 10 minutes of reading. See you back in 10. All right, welcome back. Well, let's get into our very first reading unit. Before we can get reading, I'm going to tell you that our story is called After 20 Years. It's written by a man named O. Henry. Today, we're going to do some pre-reading. We're going to learn about our author. We're going to talk about what good readers do before they read, and we're going to learn our reading strategies that we're going to focus on while reading our story. So let's get to it. So taking a look right now at the screen up here, take a look at this photo. What do you think? I want you just to take a few seconds just to take a look at it and just what are you thinking? Share out in your crew, like call on maybe 3 people and just share what are you thinking when you look at this photo? Teachers, pause and share. All right. So hopefully you shared out and some things that you maybe you were thinking when you looked at this was no way. Maybe something else you were thinking when you looked at this photo was like, oh, cool, that guy's going to be lunch. Or you're looking at National Geographic's photo of the year. Something's been done differently. Maybe you're thinking some previous knowledge of great white sharks and going, not happening unless it's in the movie Jaws. So this is what you do when you read. You notice things. You notice the text features. You question it. And you activate that prior knowledge. You might make some connections. It's what good readers do. It's the same thing you do when you look at an image and you're like, oh man, that's been photoshopped. So that's something to keep in mind when you're reading. All right, we're going to get into understanding our author and our time frame. Let's kick it on over to Mr. Cheney to teach you about O. Henry.
I'm here to do an author talk, and I'm going to tell you today about William Sidney Porter, aka O. Henry. This guy was such a big deal back in the 1900s that he only needs one name, O. Henry, and everyone knew who he was. Kind of like today, if you're talking about Beyonce in music, or Messi in soccer, or Prentice, or McCaskey in English. These people just need one name, and everyone knows them. This author was famous for his wise, witty, and warm-hearted short stories. And one of his favorite quotes that he was coined to say is, write what you like. There is no other rule. So this is very important for you to use as you write. Write what you like. That's the only rule there is, right? So writers write what they know about. And so O. Henry was born in North Carolina, and he headed out west of Texas to find his fortune. He worked in ranches, and then he got a job in a land office, and then he started working in banks as a teller, and then he became a newspaper reporter, and all this before he used all these stories to become an author. However, an interesting fact, when working in the banks, he was accused of embezzling funds from a bank, which means when an employee steals the money, not with a gun or anything, he just basically a couple of dollars here and there off each transaction, kind of don't make it into the account. He was accused of this. He went to jail for 3 years for this, but he always claimed his innocence even after leaving jail. So you never know if it was true or not. But when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. He spent these 3 years talking to criminals, gathering up all these amazing stories, because criminals have amazing stories. They got caught or are accused of these really fascinating stories. And with this knowledge, he wrote 11 books and over 600 short stories. And over 20 of these, 20 movies were made based on his stories. So this guy is a big deal. And we're reading 2 of his stories 100 years later. And so one of them we're going to start today, which is called After 20 Years. And later in the year, we'll come back to a book called, what was that book called? It was called The Gift of the Magi. And I've heard that is amazing. I'm yet to read it though. So we look forward to reading today and learning a little bit more about After 20 Years. Take it away, Miss McCat.
All right, now that we've learned something about our author, let's learn a little something about the time frame. So in our story, after 20 years, it takes place in New York City in the 1900s. And the images that you're looking at right now is what it would have looked like at that time frame. One of our main characters is a police officer. This is what the police officers typically looked like as they would walk their beat. Walking the beat is what they said for walking their territory or the area that they were assigned to. The stores and shops and everything in New York City would be closed in the evening. And the only thing that might be opened would be something like this. It looks like this. It's an all night lunch counter. So very different than what we see with New York City now with all Times Square and it's all lit up and it's, the city that never sleeps. But here, this is what it would have looked like. People walking, people in horse-drawn carriages. So when we're talking about this time frame and when we see that 10 o'clock at night, the streets, they're empty. It's quiet. People are at home. They're asleep. All the shops and stores, they're all closed. So that's what you're going to notice with the setting of our story. Okay, we have two main focuses that we're going to be working with as we're reading. One is context clues, and the other one is inferencing. We're going to start off and learn about context clues with Mr. Cheney. Good readers use context clues to figure out what the words mean when they're reading. It happens to you all the time when you're reading. You come to a word, you don't know what it means. You're not going to stop and probably Google the word. You're not going to stop and look it up in a dictionary. You just figure out what it means based on how it's used in the sentence. So we're going to do a little practice with Mr. Cheney. What I want you to do right now is either if you've got a scrap piece of paper or maybe you've just got a little whiteboard that you could write on, and we're just going to do a little practice with each one of these words, okay? Let's kick it on over to Mr. Cheney.
In class today, we're going to talk about context clues using cell phones and text messaging. So here we have a conversation happening between Michael and his friend Noah. Michael says, "I wish the sun would come out. I felt so listless all day. I don't feel like doing anything." Noah says, "I feel the same way. I'm sure going to the game tonight will make us feel a lot better." Michael replies, "I know you're right. I'm looking forward to it. It is going to be so much fun." And Noah replies, "I've been anticipating it for months. I can't believe tonight is the night we finally get to go." So if we're looking at what...
All right, let's take a look at this right here. What do you think listless means? Just write down a quick response, A, B, or C. And what do you think anticipating means? A, B, or C? Just take a second, write down what you think they mean based on how they're used, and then Mr. Cheney is going to give us our answer and tell us how he came to that answer. All right, just a little practice.
What listless might mean. We go back to the first sentence and where it's used. It says, "I felt so listless all day." Okay, it could mean bored or lazy. It could even mean excited. But when I start looking at the words around it, I wish the sun would come out. So it's a cloudy day and I don't feel like doing anything today. That's definitely not excited. So it's between bored and lazy. And if you don't feel like doing anything, that's lazy. Bored people want to do something. They just don't know what to do. So it must mean lazy. For my second word, anticipating, it's used in the context of Noah replies, "I've been anticipating it for months." Okay, so you could be hopeful because it's happening in months. It could be planning. It could be looking forward to. Okay, anticipating. You're looking forward to something. So let's look for a context to see which is the best fit here. Okay, so I can't believe it's tonight. All right, so hopeful is more for the future. It's not. It may or may not happen. This is actually happening. You're not planning for it. You're actually looking forward to it because it's happening tonight. So anticipating in this scenario looks like looking forward to. Let's jump to our second cell phone scenario here. Jerome is on the phone with Chanel. And Jerome says, "This math homework is bewildering. Are you lost too?" Chanel says, "I know. This doesn't look like anything I've ever seen before. Did we go over this in class?" Jerome says, "I think I sort of remember it. I'm looking back at my notes, and they are helping." Chanel says, "You are so resourceful. That is such a good idea. I would never have thought of that." So bewildering in this scenario is...
So what do you think bewildering means? Do you think it means A, clear, B, long, C, confusing? Now, what do you think resourceful means? Do you think it means A, sneaky, B, helpful, or C, able? Jot down a quick answer and let's check in with Mr. Cheney to see how you did.
Is something that means something like confusing or hard or long. And let's just jump in and look at the words around it. Are you lost too? Okay, so long wouldn't really be lost. So confusing, that makes me think of confusing, not clear or long. Okay. In regards to resourceful, is it sneaky, helpful, or able? Okay, so you are so resourceful. That is such a good idea. And if it's a good idea, it's not sneaky. So it's either helpful or able. Okay, so let's keep looking through. I would never have thought of that. Okay, looking back at my notes, they're helping. In this scenario, able is helpful, but it means that you are clever and you have this cool idea that no one else thought of, and you're able to think differently and come up with a solution. And that is our definition of resourceful. That's all.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cheney. All right, some other words that you're going to run into with our story. Just a little pre-reading. Always before you read, check out some unfamiliar vocabulary. So here's some words that you might not be that familiar with, like intricate, which means it's complex and it's full of complicated detail. Dismally, which means gloomy, miserably. Absurdity, nonsense, foolishness. But then there's also going to be some old school vocab here, like well nigh, which means very nearly, or Pacific thoroughfare. So people say, I was walking down the Pacific thoroughfare, which really just means a calm street. So those are things that we just typically don't hear, but you're going to encounter this in our reading that we do. All right, inferences. So today we're going to learn about making inferences. This is something that you've done for a very long time. You do it when you watch YouTube, you do it when you watch your Netflix, and you do it when you read. It's using the evidence around you to come up with those conclusions. And it's the things that the author doesn't just tell you, but you can figure it out by the clues. Like take example of this with this picture right here. So the character has a diaper in her hand. She's got spit up on her shirt and a bottle warming on the counter. You can basically infer that she's a mom. It doesn't tell you that she's a mom, but you can infer by the clues. Another example would be this one down here. A detective enters the house. They see it's been ransacked. He sees blood on the floor, and it leads out the back door. You can basically infer that a crime has happened, and you can probably also infer that somebody is injured and bleeding. We're going to do a little practice with inferencing here. I'm going to show you a little clip. When the clip is done, I want you to tell me, what can you infer about the little old lady in this clip, and what can you infer about the teenager in this clip? So basically, the things that the video doesn't tell you, but you can basically figure it out. Things about their personality, things about how they feel. All right, so let's watch this little clip called Snack Time. All right. So you just watched this little clip. I want you inside your crew to just have a quick discussion. What can you infer about this teenager based upon his actions? What kind of guy is he? What's important to him? What does he value? And then do the same thing with the little old lady. What kind of person is this little old lady? What can you tell me about her personality based upon her actions? So go ahead and just have a quick chat, and then I'll see you back here in just a couple minutes. All right. So you probably had some different discussions, maybe about the little old lady having some anger issues. I mean, she body slammed the vending machine for her cookies, or maybe she just has some serious hangry issues. But I could probably infer that she just has a negative viewpoint of teenagers from the look that she gave him when she sat down next to him to, not wanting to share with him. So you can just see that she has that negative viewpoint of teenagers. And then I can also infer about that little old lady is that she's forgetful. She obviously didn't remember sticking those into her big purse or her pocketbook, as I'm sure she calls it. And then the teenager, you guys probably talked about how the fact that his personality was pretty chill, pretty laid back. He didn't care. He'll share his cookies. He's a pretty caring kid who seems like he likes little old people. He shares his cookies. He even cleans off her lap and breaks his cookie in half. And he just kind of ignores all of her yelling and screaming. So you could probably infer that about him. So you're going to have to do that inside our story. So be ready to make some inferences on our main characters, what they value and who they really truly are. Okay, that brings us to our last thing that we're going to work on today, and that's getting ready for some of the things that happen inside our story. We're going to do an anticipation guide. So right now, if you can, pass this out if you haven't already. If you're a virtual student, you should be able to find this right on your Google Classroom to fill it in. So right now, we're going to just look at some different things that show up in our story. So take a look right here. We're going to take a minute and we're going to answer 1 through 5. For each one of these, I want you guys to do a quick, do you agree? Do you disagree? And why? And then predict how it's going to show up in our story called After 20 Years. So let's start off right here. Number 1, if a friend has committed a crime, you have a responsibility to report it. Well, you might put down that you agree with that. Or you might put down that you disagree with that. But you have to tell me why. So just a quick thing, just a quick phrase, maybe a sentence. So agree. I would say agree. And my reason would be if my friend commits a crime and I know about it, I'm in deep trouble too. Now, I need to make a little prediction. How is this going to show up in my story after 20 years? So right now, I'm going to do a little prediction. How is this going to show up? In the story, a friend committing a crime, responsibility to report it. I'm going to say some best friends get in a fight over a crime. That's how I think it's going to show up in the story. So just a quick agree, disagree, and a prediction. Maybe you disagreed with this. Maybe you're like, I disagree. You know what? If somebody commits a crime, snitches get stitches. So whatever you want to put right here for number 1, that's up to you, but make sure you back it up. All right, when you're ready, let's move to number 2. With number 2, again, friends will inevitably grow apart. This is going to show up in our story. So I'm going to put in here agree or disagree. I'm going to say disagree on this one for me. And I'm going to use some personal experience with this one. I have a friend that I've been friends with since I was 8 years old, and we're still friends. And her name is Kate. We've been friends since we were 8 years old. Now I need to predict, how is this going to show up in the story? So friends growing apart inevitably means it is certain to happen. So predict, how's it going to show up in the story? And I would jot down a quick prediction. How is that going to show up in our story? When you're done with 2, we'll move on to 3. If at any point in time I'm going too quickly, teachers just go ahead and pause and then go on to the next one. So number 3, People who have different values cannot forge strong friendships. So, right here, people who have different values. So, values, things that are important to them, like being honest or following the law, those types of values cannot forge or build those strong friendships. So, people who have different values. So, I might say, I disagree. I think if I value one thing and my friend values something else, we can still have a really strong friendship. And then I'm going to do a quick prediction. How is this going to show up in our story after 20 years? Let's go on to number 4 when you're ready. Wealth, money. Wealth can change a person. Do you agree or disagree that wealth or money can change a person? I'm going to put I agree, and then I'm going to write a little reason why I agree with that right there. Maybe it's personal experience. Maybe it's just my own opinion. After I do that, I'm going to predict. How is this going to show up in the story? Wealth can change a person. Maybe a character wins the lottery and they move into a big fancy house and leave their friend behind. So I'm going to make a prediction right here. All right, final one. Number 5. There are some circumstances where it's appropriate to turn your back on a friend. There are some instances, there are some times where it's appropriate, it's okay to turn your back on a friend. Do you agree or do you disagree? That's a tough one. And I know sometimes these seem like they can go either way, but I want you to pick one way. I want you to pick one side and stick with it. So again, agree or disagree. Maybe you agree and then give a quick reason why. Maybe it's like, I know of a time when I had to walk away from one of my friends. Or maybe it's you would disagree because you're like, my friends always stand by me. And then predict. How is this going to show up in our story after 20 years? All right, go ahead and finish 1 through 5, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, guys, now that you've finished with 1 through 5, let's hold a little discussion inside our crew. So teachers, feel free to lead this any way you'd like. Basically, go through and hear some responses for 1 through 5. Go through and share some responses for number 1 and if people agree or disagree and why, and share some predictions, and do the same thing for numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5. Sharing as many as you have time for. If you get done early, feel free to get back into those independent reading books. Tomorrow, we're going to be reading After 20 Years. Don't lose those notes. You'll want to have them. See you tomorrow.